Hello, and welcome to the Physical Therapy Owners Club podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Shields, and I've got Eric Herman, the partner and chief clinical officer of Buffalo Rehab Group in the state of New York. Eric, thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Nathan. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I read your article in the January Impact magazine for the APTA's PPS, and I was impressed by the short article that you wrote about KPIs. And so I thought, wow, this is an opportunity to kind of delve into KPIs a little bit. I talked about key KPIs in the past on the podcast, but it's always worth coming back around and talking about KPIs and how they lead to action for owners. It's one thing to track KPIs, but it's another thing to take those KPIs and know what to do next, right?
Right. And also like to help coach your team onto how to be best at what they do so they feel job satisfaction also. So do your KPIs match with your clinicians' values and how they want to see themselves be as a clinician themselves too?
Yeah. So we're going to get into that. I know you deal with not only the patient-related KPIs, but also the provider engagement KPIs, team engagement KPIs. But before we get into that, Eric, tell us a little bit about you, where you're coming from, and what got you to where you're at.
I grew up just outside of Buffalo, New York, in a village called Hamburg. So we're south of Buffalo. So when people look at New York State, we're closest to the Great Lakes in that region there. So I grew up there, went to high school here, college here. My kids grew up in the same town that my wife and I did, and they're actually, two of them are in college now, staying local. But I did go to University at Buffalo in New York State. I graduated with my bachelor's in physical therapy. Shortly thereafter, I began working for Buffalo Rehab Group in 2002. So it's a private physical therapy practice. When I joined on, and we had 2 offices, and since then we've grown. Now we have 13 locations, with our 14th location opening up in the Buffalo area coming up. August 1st. Yeah. So we're on a growth plan, and took over reins as chief clinical officer back in 2017. Myself and 3 others took over the practice from the original owners, which opened it in 1990. And since then we've grown to over 100 clinicians and 200 total employees. And we're continuing to grow on a great journey. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Something to really be proud of. And we talked about this a little bit before I pushed record, but I think it's the first time I've heard of the chief clinical officer role. Tell me a little bit about what a chief clinical officer does, maybe compared to a chief operations or.
Yeah, certainly. So my main role is to ensure that our clinicians have what they need to serve our community. And so in a form of, they have the right skills and the right processes to be sure that our community is getting the extraordinary service and results that they deserve and that we hope for as clinicians.
Okay. Yeah, I can see in our organizational structure that it was just a different title, VP of Operations, right? And so your responsibility is for the production and of the team, their engagement, but also their growth, almost like quality assurance of the product.
Right. Yeah, correct. Yeah. So a lot of what we do is continue education. So I build continue education programs for our team, work on our mentorship programs. And so that's part of my team's role on the clinical side. So I have 3 regional coordinators that work with me to help coach our team to be the best clinicians. And we start it with a pretty in-depth mentorship process and teach them our KPIs, their KPIs that they're responsible for.
Yeah. Well, that's cool that you guys do that right off the bat with your onboarding. And that is teaching them, because it's very clear to me that you guys are clear about your KPIs and who's responsible for what, simply based on your description of your position as the clinical officer, because we talked about KPIs. And so it's interesting, simply from your conversation, your explanation of how you onboard your new employees. You guys are very KPI driven, stat driven, and with objective data to determine how well you're doing, because many organizations, mine included when we were young, the numbers are right. I've hit my new patient goal. I hit my total visit goal. and my bank account looks good. And those were my KPI drivers, right?
Yeah. I
Right.
get that. Yeah, this has evolved a lot over the years. And
Right.
we work with advisory group ourselves. I think Steve Stalzer was on
Mhm.
a couple of times with you, and Mike Osler. I work a ton with Mike Osler. We meet on a
Yeah.
regular basis. 8150. Yeah. So
Yeah.
similar to, to have kind of the ability to continue to, how can we keep making this better? And with that evolved a way to, measure what we do as like, and find success behind it, but then also like get the conversation to a point where we're able to explain why this matters for the clinician and why this matters for the patient and our community members. So that's really the key to it, is that, nobody wants to hear about their stats or their data. And so we talk about it as like towards the feeling side of it. So it makes the individual feel that these data points, that these KPIs will help them be the best clinician for their patients. Because that's ultimately why we get in the profession, is to help people and to get people to achieve their goals. And so once you can relate these KPIs and some of our sub KPIs to clearly show the clinician that, yeah, you're hitting these marks. And when you're hitting these marks, we know you're delivering great care. That's why these marks exist.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, because there are some of those owners, and maybe they haven't been tracking KPIs, but and then they implement some kind of KPI or stat tracking program, and you can understand or maybe predict that some team members are going to say, "You guys are all about the numbers. I don't know why we're all doing this. Everything was just fine." If you do not make that connection, and kudos to you guys that you're doing it from the very beginning and not trying to implement it later, is to say, KPIs are simply objective data that tells us, number one, are we providing the care that we say that we're going to provide? Number two, are the patients getting the results that we say that they're going to get? And number three, are we being efficient? Are we being with our time? A lot of team members might not know low level of efficiency that physical therapy provides to the communities around them, when you see that only, 15%, 8% of people complete their full plans of care.
Yeah,
we're not doing a good job at that as an industry, no matter how good we feel about what we're providing. Right.
And I think a lot of it is that, like, so as a clinician, you look at it as, my patients are happy. I know my patients are happy. Right. So, because what you're getting is people are discharging, and the ones that discharge in front of you face to face, they're going to be lifelong, evangelists for you, lifelong friends for you. You see them at the farmer's market or the grocery store, and they're going to want to give you a hug. Right. And so if we're measuring ourselves only on those people, like you said, it's the numbers I've seen is like, it's 30% of people complete the plan of cares, which is
true. Whatever it is, it's horrible.
It's awful. Right. It's awful. And it's like the numbers as high as 25% of patients make it to or drop out before 3 visits or something like that. It's incredible to me. So what can we do to help our patients, get to their end? And so if we start looking at the right pieces to know, well, how many people am I getting to the finish line? And it's not that we're trying to point a finger at a clinician, like, you're not doing a great job. It's, how can we help you get your patients to the finish line? Because we need it as a profession, let alone as a business, and then as an individual and a clinician. So keeping a patient on track to meet their goals, our profession needs that.
Right. Yeah, totally agree. And I'm glad we're talking about it, because yes, it helps us determine how well we're doing as far as living out our purpose as a clinic. It also, that objective data, though, can come back and tell us how well the provider is doing on an individual basis. I mean, that is a 1B to the 1A behind the purpose of finding out the stats of the individual providers, because ultimately you're going to have some kind of employee review. They're going to want a raise. They're going to want bonuses. Well, what do we base that on? We don't base that off of good feelings, right? Right. So it's helpful to have some objective data to help with that.
So yeah, and the WebPT came out with, and I wish I could remember the year, not that long ago, that the That was like where the 30% that I remember, 30% of patients complete their plan of cares. Of the ones that complete their plan of cares, it was 17.3 visits per evaluation. So that's astounding to me, because it's like, those are not numbers that we see within our profession. I know when I went to PT school like decades ago, but when I went to PT school, we're taught the sooner that we get the patient out our door, the better clinician we are, which I think that was kind of explaining why our visits per new, we call it commitment to care, why our commitment to care was so low. We're just trying to explain our data, like, oh, my average is 6. Well, that means I'm a great clinician compared to the person that's 17. Well, no, you got to think of all those cases that, like, chronic pain, that doesn't happen in 6 visits, and really we try to coach our clinicians, our PTs and OTs, that a lot of the patients that we see that have had prolonged issues, it's going to take them longer, so we see the best value somewhere around that 10 to 12 week mark. So, and then that's for a typical patient. So we use outcomes tools as one of our KPIs, and we see that the best results come if a community member has been with us for around that 10 to 12 week mark.
10 to 12 weeks, not 10 to 12 visits.
Not 10 to 12 visits, right? 10 to 12 weeks.
More than 10 to 12 visits, right?
Most of the time.
Most likely, right?
Most likely, yes.
I get it.
And that kind of leads to that 17 visits, kind of makes sense to me. So
yeah, exactly.
We like to see our commitment to care number to be 16 visits is our goal. And our productivity, our performance bonuses are on that 14 visit mark. So we're getting our clinicians to where it's like, yeah, we would expect that we're shooting for complete plan of cares, and we know by, that's a large data group that what PT uses, 17.3 for those that complete plan of cares. Right. Let's complete plan of cares.
Right. Interesting. So you pointed out 4 specific metrics in the article, and one of them was decrease in patient engagement. Is that your metric then? Average number of visits per new patient? Is that your metric for patient engagement?
Well, patient engagement scores, we use NPS score for
that's patient satisfaction.
Oh, patient engagement. Again, we call it commitment to care. Yes. Visits. How many? So we coach it to our clinicians is how many encounters during their plan of care journey does your patient need to get the best outcomes?
Okay. Yeah.
So like talking to them is the feeling behind it. But yes. So our patient engagement.
So that's remind me, is that your key stat as the chief clinical officer that you're responsible for?
Correct. Our visits per evaluation or visits per new, or like I said, we refer to it as our team's commitment to care. And so my goal for our clinicians is to get them to 16.
Okay, cool. And then it was interesting before we started the interview here that you were talking about your personal or your position's KPI. You have a key KPI, and then I love that you said you have sub KPIs.
Yeah.
Because if you're clear about the KPIs, there are typically primary KPIs, and then there are KPIs that individually will improve the KPI, right? They all kind of work. It's hard to say all KPIs are the same. There should be one lead KPI for each position in the organization, but there are sub KPIs that will improve that key KPI and tell you how well they're doing, right?
Right. That's the idea. Yeah. The idea of lead indicators versus lag measures, right? So commitment to care, our number happens after someone's discharged. So we need something that we can look at in real time that will drive the processes are driving towards getting a great result for that lag measure.
Yeah, so give us a couple of examples of your sub KPIs that lead to improved number of visits per evaluation, which is your KPI.
So the main one that we look at with our clinicians is days scheduled at evaluation. So how many days out did you schedule? We know that the best results happen, like the best outcome changes happen at that 8 to 12 week mark. So if we're only scheduling 10 visits on, or 10 days, 10 calendar days.
Like 2 weeks.
2 weeks. if we're scheduling out 2 weeks at our evaluation and that's our average, we're not setting the right expectations up for the patient. We may be telling them, hey, this is going to be about 7 weeks before you're feeling like you can do your day-to-day tasks. And it's going to be 12 weeks before you feel strong enough to do the things you really want to do, like the backyard skills, like you're raking, you're shoveling, you're carrying mulch bags. That, for what we're seeing you here today for with this back injury, we're probably looking at 12 weeks of care and progressions before we get you to the finish line you want. And how does that sound? Well, that makes sense based on strength gains. You go through that whole conversation with the patient, and I'm going to schedule them 3 visits in the next 2 weeks. Right? That doesn't make sense. Like, so right. My goal with my patients in front of me is that I look at it as almost like separating out into 4 phases of care. So when I'm treating a patient, I talk to them about 4 phases of care. First phase is a protective phase or a pain control phase, where I want to create a new environment for the patient. And that takes about 3 weeks. I want to see you twice a week during those 3 weeks. And then the second phase is a mobility phase. I'm going to see you once a week for this phase. And it's going to take us 3 weeks to get through this phase. Once we get to stability, it's another 3 weeks. That third phase, I'm trying to schedule through that third phase on that first visit, right? So then it's giving me 9 weeks of care set out. And I'm scheduling at my expected number of visits that I need to see that person for in each phase based on their condition. If someone has resources coming in, they're fit, they're active, I may not need to see them as much in that mobility phase or the stability phase, right? So having that full education to a patient, our KPI of looking at days scheduled at evaluation, visits scheduled at evaluation not visits scheduled at evaluation, but the number of calendar days scheduled at evaluation is really key to know that our clinicians are providing the right information and then following up with the action of scheduling it. So that's our main sub KPI.
Well, I love what you're doing there, because you're using visits scheduled at evaluation, calendar days scheduled out, which I haven't heard of before. So that's interesting. But nonetheless, you're using that as a lead indicator. Is what it sounds like.
Oh, totally.
That's not a lag indicator. Well, it is a lag indicator, but you are using the lag indicator to predict things are going to look in the future, right?
Right. So you're getting, so the nice thing about it is that you're getting your patients on the schedule. You're setting up the expectation for the patient. So I can look at a clinician. We use business intelligence that populates. It's one of the things that we look at on a daily, weekly basis, depending on who the clinician is to know what's your average calendar days scheduled at your evaluation. So you're right. It's in a way, it is still like measured because it's a behavior that our clinician made at the evaluation. Yeah, but then in the past, it's a past thing. But our clinicians know that we are looking at it, right? That we are going to educate them on it, and we tell them why it's so important and critical for them to complete plan of cares. Which, as a clinician, we all want our patients. Every patient walks in over. We want them to have a successful outcome, right? And so we know from looking at this we didn't come up with this up until the last probably 2 years. This was, so it took us. So it was 2017, so 6, so 4 years before it was like, is this the thing we need to be looking at? Like, I'm sure. Yeah,
exactly.
And so we find that like the clinicians that not only educated the patient on it, but then the act of scheduling, and you're creating this timeline for a patient, we're going to be successful in this 52 days or 56 days. If I said to a patient, we're going to be successful in 14 days, that's not going to get the results that our patient wants.
That's unethical.
Right. Yeah. It's like, yeah.
What kind of magic lotions do you have? But that's just one example. I'm sure you've got a few different metrics that lead to that patient engagement, completion of care statistic, right? You also talked about how you're training your people on, and maybe there isn't a KPI specifically for this, but you also train your providers on teaching that plan of care to your patients, right?
Right. So yeah, we call it whiteboard wisdom. Our C.
Is there a KPI associated with that?
It's so as a new clinician, when they come out to us, and this is a new clinician for Buffalo Rehab Group. So if someone's worked somewhere else for 3 years and they come on to us, part of their mentorship is that they're working with their office leader as a mentor. And so they go through and look at the whiteboard wisdoms that the provider has done for their patients. So whether it's so we have a tear off sheets that people fill, that our providers fill out, and or they take a snapshot, a picture of the actual whiteboard when they're done educating the patient, that they're showing the patient, this is the tissue that's involved. These are the activities that you're telling me that you're limited on. This is the timeline that we expect these activities to be better on. This is the number of visits in each phase of care you're going to need. So all that information is there. And so what we're looking at for our newer clinicians with us is that they've done that education, and so they have to, they do prove that they've done it by their office leaders being able to actually see that this was done.
I love that you call it whiteboard wisdom, because I think we can all picture what that means, right? Maybe not every treatment room has a whiteboard, but you can imagine a physical therapist standing at the whiteboard after the initial evaluation and say, okay, this is my plan for you. Here's the tissue involved. This is how we're going to attach it or attack it. Here is the timeline for it. And write that all out. Some people are very visual. And I love that you guys are doing that, because I never did that, but why not? Some people are better visual learners than auditory learners. Why not offer both, right?
Right.
And then you can really get buy-in.
Oh yeah. We used to have small whiteboards in our office, in all of our exam rooms. And then again, our CEO, Jeff Woodrich, he's the one that, did the term whiteboard wisdom for us. And him and our chief marketing officer, Steve Gazer, one of my other business partners, like their mission was to get a whiteboard in every single eval room.
Yeah.
So we have now whiteboards in every evaluation room, and we have whiteboards in the clinic. So I'm constantly writing up a patient, in the clinic, and this is the next programming you're doing. This is the phase we're in now. Remember, then let's reference this. So patients take pictures of their whiteboard wisdom at their evaluation, and so that and I tell them, hold me to this number of days. So when I'm telling them that this is a 4-month process to get back from their knee injury to be 100% back, it's going to be a 4-month process, and it's going to be this number of visits. Hold me accountable to these numbers. If we get behind this track, I want to know that I'm behind on this track that I've promised you.
Right. I love that. Wow, that's really cool. And so you can see that the whiteboard wisdom and the training on that, and although it might not have a specific KPI, but it's going to be checked off on the onboarding checklist.
Correct, it is.
That they've shown the competence in that. That's going to lead to a KPI that you can measure, which is the number of total days scheduled at initial evaluation, which then if that's meeting the mark, then you are getting to the 14, 16, 17 visits per new patient metric that you want, right? Yeah. So you can see how that all flows together.
Yes. And then the cool part is it does match other things, other pieces of our business, where we have phone calls every day for new evaluations. If I'm not scheduled my patients out, evaluations, there looks like there's a spot for evaluation. Well, if I haven't scheduled my patients 2 weeks out, and then all of a sudden evaluations start popping on my schedule because I'm not scheduled out properly, whose fault is that? That's mine as a clinician, that I didn't manage my schedule well. I didn't manage my current caseload well. So now I have more evaluations on my schedule that I don't really have space for that.
Right. Yeah, I get it. Interesting, man. Yeah. And I love how you can also, by that method, that end KPI is decreasing. You know where to look backwards to see where the ball was dropped. Okay, what is that statistic for calendar days scheduled at initial evaluation? And if that's lower, okay, now why? Okay, did they do the trainings, they do the whiteboard wisdom trainings to begin with? And I know you have many directions that you could go off of that, right? You could be looking at arrival rates and other things like that. Why not?
Right, but that's the number one thing is that if patient is not going to arrive if they're not on the schedule.
Right.
So we do look at arrival rates.
Sure.
But we don't lean on arrival rates, because what we don't want is for patients to not be scheduled for their plan of care. There's no way they're going to meet their plan of care if they're not scheduled for it.
Right.
So we have, that is another one of the KPIs, sub KPIs that we do look at as arrival rates, but we, of course, we don't coach You need patients to show up to their visits. We coach them on the processes that will get patients to show up to their visits.
There you go. Yeah. You're focusing on the front end stuff. Did you sell the plan of care to begin with?
Right.
Let's start there. Did we talk to them about the cancellation policy, maybe the cancellation fee, if you use that or not?
Right.
We talked about that all at the front end. And if you have prepared all that at the front end, then the arrival rate you'd imagine should be relatively good if you did all those things properly.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Yeah. Also talked about some other KPIs. The other one being, and you alluded to it, the patient patient satisfaction. And that's where NPS, the Net Promoter Score, right?
Yes, we use that. And again, this is interesting for us is that, do we care about our Net Promoter Score, that it's above 90%? Yes, for sure. And it is. But more important is that we have patients that are telling us how we're doing. So our entire team performance bonus monthly is based on that more than 45% of our patients are responding. So of the number of evals, so it's a response rate. And we're typically above 60% of our patients are telling us how we're doing on a monthly basis.
And these are responses to phone calls, text, emails. What are the responses to?
So we use PT Wired. We use their patient engagement. Was on a couple, I think it was at the end of May.
Just a couple of episodes ago.
Yeah. So we use PT Wired, and they have an NPS part of that. And so that gets pushed to our patients after their sixth visit. After 6 days, and then after 30 days. Okay. And we can also manually send it to a patient too. So if a patient's telling us about our experience in the clinic, we'll stop. And you know what? I'm gonna send you our NPS score. Let us know how you're doing. So you seem to be pretty satisfied. I'm gonna push this to your phone, and so the automatic send, and then they let us know. And so our clinicians are trained to educate our patients that they'll be getting an NPS survey. How likely are you to refer a family or a friend to Buffalo Rehab Group? 0.
Right there. Yeah, and it's just a 1-question survey.
Right. Hit the button and it's done. And our providers can, it looks like I haven't got one from you yet. Do you mind if I send you a survey just to let my team know how well that we're doing and of your experience? And so that manual send change that they have with PT Wired has helped out a lot. Like I said, we're typically above 60% response rates. It's great that our whole team is involved, right? So everybody in Buffalo Rehab Group will get a monthly incentive if our entire team is above that 45% response rate.
Oh, cool. And so your responses then come through the app, or does the app then push to text or something like that?
Pushes an email to the patient.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
And then they can go then they click the email and it goes right to the app, and then they hit
Oh, okay. Gotcha. For those people who don't have apps and they're thinking, well, how would I do that? You're talking maybe an email campaign, but I think more importantly is that the provider in the moment that the patient is effusive about your care, where you're saying, hey, do you mind if we get have you take a 1-question survey to tell us how you're doing? Do you mind? So then you don't have to have the PT Wired app to do that. It's very efficient and very helpful to have that. But if you don't, you can always use an email.
Sure. Yeah, certainly. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to measure. Reach through IPT has
so they have that too. Yeah, right. Yeah. To go back to the previous KPI of patient engagement, patient satisfaction, do you have a sub KPI for that? Like the number of emails that go out or anything like that? If there are some other KPIs related to it, like the previous KPI.
Yes, for us, we do. It's through PT Wired. If you're not putting a patient in PT Wired,
okay, simple.
You can't send them an NPS score.
Oh, yeah.
Because you have to set them up with the exercise program in PT Wired in order to get there. So that also helps us out at getting more of our clinicians using PT Wired, because the goal is every month that all of us are responsible for getting those NPS scores. So that's our way to use our digital home exercise program too.
Yeah. So there is a sub KPI, essentially a percentage of your new patients that are signed into PT Wired.
Exactly.
Oh, okay. You could say, how many of your patients do you have emails for? I mean, you can't send this out if you don't have their email address.
Well, and that's what it previously was. And
yeah, exactly.
Now, in order to set them up on PTWire, you need their email address. So that's in there too. So,
yeah. Okay, gotcha. The cool thing also, you are the CCO. You're responsible for patient engagement and patient satisfaction. You're also responsible for the team member satisfaction, not just the PTs. Is this the entire business team satisfaction, or just providers that you're responsible?
No, we have another division, our people and culture division, that's responsible for our overall team engagement, our clinical team engagement. So,
gotcha.
And I know that was part of the article,
but that's not necessarily under your department.
That's not under my umbrella. So
that's a key indicator. Yeah, right.
Certainly. We meet with our people and culture team on a weekly basis, and one of the things we do discuss and talk about is our clinician retention, and which we're at, I think, 95% clinician retention, which is
that's awesome.
Yeah, we do pretty well. So that's pretty awesome. And part of my role is also clinical education, and like we call it our lifelong learning division. So we build our own continuing education, but then we also provide a stipend for it. And part of our team engagement is our clinicians using their stipend. Our clinicians going to our clinical education events. Mm-hmm. And so those are part of, that's kind of where, my team and the people and culture team kind of work together, create these events, who's going to them, which of our clinicians are engaged in learning some of the new things that we're doing, the new technology we're bringing. And so that's kind of definitely where we will work with each other. We start to notice that, these set of clinicians aren't coming to the events that the clinical team is putting on. And so then now, like, we're having our people and culture team target those individuals with meetings and, how can we help you extend your career? So, a lot of conversations are between departments. So that way we know the engagement of each individual. So if, for me, as clinician isn't coming to our clinical events, mm-hmm. but when we go to happy hours, they're highly motivated to go to the happy hours, or to, we had an event just yesterday, a running event, and some of the clinicians that I don't see at our clinical events were at that running event. So they're engaged with our company. They're just like, I have to figure out what's going to push their, get their juices flowing clinically to continue to improve themselves as a clinician.
So you're measuring essentially, and you might not have a clear number set, but you're measuring in a way their engagement via their attendance to on-site trainings or clinical education trainings of their own choosing, or the parties and activities that you do as a group. You're somewhat measuring those, or at least trying to figure out who's dropping off where and how can we address them.
The people and culture team they have a spreadsheet.
Oh, yes. They have the KPIs and all that.
Yes.
For team engagement.
Team engagement. Yes.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Yeah. We used to do an NPS score, not only for our patients, but also for our team members. And so I think once or twice a year, we give them the NPS score. How likely would you refer a family or friend to become an employee in our organization? And so we prided ourselves on a high NPS score for team engagement. But I like what you're talking about as well, as who's taking advantage of the continuing education, because you want to see them improving professionally so that they have some job satisfaction in their technical mm-hmm. skills, but also who's engaging in the parties and the runs and the charity events that you guys are doing, and so that they can also get a little bit of fulfillment outside of that.
Right. We do Gallup surveys, I think, twice a year with our team. And then we also have another survey so the other quarter. So quarterly, there's some sort of engagement survey, like you described, the NPS. So we do have that also, I guess. Not my division, so it wasn't top of my mind.
Well, I'm sure you get the survey yourself.
I get the survey, and I do answer it every quarter.
Yeah. Is it a number of questions, and are they questions that you came up with yourselves, or did you research and find a patient engagement questionnaire that's out there?
It's ever adapting and changing. So what I know is that it's, yes. So, I don't know where they're getting the questions from, but I know the last one I answered was different than the previous one slightly.
So it's like the same every time. Yeah. Oh, interesting. Yeah. That's cool to know. All right. And then the last KPI you talked about, your financial division and assessing for financial stability. And again, I know that's not your department. Nevertheless, there are some leading and lag indicators that you might want to follow and be on top of if you're going to make sure that the lifeblood of your company is still flowing, right?
Yeah, certainly. So where our clinical team kind of works with our billing team, meet with them biweekly at this point to go through what needs or what, I guess, processes do we need to slightly adjust to make sure that our billers are getting the right information from our clinicians. So we look at our procedure codes. We call it abundance of care and diversity of care. And that's mainly where my team is responsible for providing that our clinicians have the right amount of time to work with their patients the way they want to. And so that's measurement of abundance of care. So we would anticipate that majority of our patients are getting 3 procedure codes. We don't mandate any codes, but we would anticipate that we should have somewhere around 30 to 40 minutes of direct one-to-one care with each patient. We shouldn't see much more than that. We shouldn't see much under that. And if our team isn't providing that amount of time with a patient, obviously our billing department says, so, hey guys, there's something going on over here. And so that's one of our KPIs that we measure. And diversity of care is that we're utilizing our full skill set, practicing at the top of our license. We're using therapeutic activities, neuromuscular education, TheraX, manuals. So we're using a variety of codes at each treatment. We shouldn't see therapeutic activity times 3 because we shouldn't see a TheraX times 3. We should see that we're practicing at the top of license means that we're using all of our different skills. And that's where I coach our clinicians on that too. So our billing team for us is going to kind of turn around and say, hey, you know what, we're noticing that these visits don't seem to, have the same coding we would expect. And then when we look at their schedules, are they overscheduling themselves or are they undercoding or undervaluing their care? So that's kind of been the determination that we go back and forth yet. But our billing team has their own specific KPIs. They look at ARC ratios. And then they also have processes that they follow daily and weekly to make sure that things are flowing through our clearinghouse the right way. And
exactly.
They talk about it. I don't fully understand it. It's just
you let the other guys, the CFO figure that out, right?
That's right.
Right. Totally understood. But I love the thoughtfulness that you put into both the abundance of care and diversity of care issues, because that's one thing where simply the semantics of it gives a better representation of what is expected versus, hey, listen, guys, when we bill 3 TheraX and 1 manual, we're not going to get paid as much as we will if we use multiple codes. And we're also not subject to MPPR reductions if we use multiple codes multiple times. Let's diversify our care, number one, and also let's teach you how to document for a diversity of care and which exercises might be more appropriately billed as therapeutic activities versus neuromuscular re-education. And so I just imagine, I don't know anything about your organization, but I'm pretty certain in saying that you're teaching that to them.
Yes, and
under diversity of care.
Correct. And diversity of care, we're coaching them on what each code really represents and means. And we don't, as clinicians, we don't bill, we don't submit our charges. That's not what we do as clinicians. We provide care and then code the care we provide.
Exactly.
And so that's how we coach our clinicians. So we don't, the charge actually happens when it gets to our billing team.
Right.
That's how we so we're writing the code down as the procedure we performed.
Right.
And then it goes to our billing department and they're the ones that actually press the button for billing.
Exactly.
So all we coach our clinicians on is that these are the skills you use. These are the processes you use with the patient. This is the education you provide with the patient. That's this code. Mm-hmm. When you do this type of procedure, that's this code. And so we educate them on the codes themselves and just document in code what you performed in the clinic.
Right.
And it's then moved over to the billing department to submit the charge.
Well, I think the important thing to recognize there, and what you guys did recognize and what we've all seen, is that we don't learn these things in physical therapy school.
No.
And we don't learn what the codes mean in physical therapy. We don't learn them in our internships. So the fact that you guys take it another level, anyone who's going to join Buffalo Rehab Group is going to get a good training on exactly what the CPT code says and how to best utilize it in what circumstances.
So I didn't understand it until being educated by Robbie Leonard at 8150 Advisors. And that was really just a few years back, where it was like the light bulbs went off on like, oh, now I get it. But so I practiced for almost 20 years without having a full appreciation for what it was and what it actually meant. So that was eye-opening to me. And so for me to continue to learn at that rate after being involved with it for as long as it was, what does it say about the clinician that was with us, has been with us for only 5 years or new to us? That was pretty powerful to me. And I was like, we have to really find a way to educate our team on what this actually means.
Right.
And so we pushed hard. It was actually during COVID that we really took time to educate our team. Yeah, took time to educate our team on what the procedure codes actually mean and what diversity of care really is.
Yeah, it's cool to hear that you took advantage of the time that you had there. Is it safe to say that maybe your profit margins improved a little bit as you focused on diversity of
Oh yeah, we were completely undercoding the procedures we were performing. We were completely undercoding.
Right.
The biggest piece of it is what I learned from working with Robbie, was that our education to why our treatments are clinically relevant for that individual, and the teaching aspect of it. I wasn't coding that. So I was coding the actual moments that I was doing something, but not coding the time that I spent assessing why I would do it, or so that part of the code is assessment of why this next treatment that I'm going to do is important, the education to the patient on how to do it, the corrections, so I was maybe coding my corrections and the act of doing the move, like a lunge, not what led me to deciding the lunge, watching them walk and noticing they don't have the right kind of hip extension. Right. And so then I chose a lunge because of that. And then I reassessed the walking. All of that is supposed to be the time coded performing that lunge. And I was not aware of that.
That's great. I really appreciate how you guys have looked at these in silos, and obviously as you've done all these things, not only in the end has it improved overall revenues, but also I'm sure net profits, and increased patient engagement, and increased provider engagement, and increased patient satisfaction. Just to say that as you do all these things and put them together, what's good for the patients and for the providers is best for the business.
Correct. And this is kind of where it goes all the way back to what we started with. It's plan of cares, right? So we complete plan of cares. That means our patients are satisfied because they're sticking around with us long enough to complete it. Our clinicians are seeing more of their patients earn successful outcomes, which leads to more job satisfaction. And if we're using our time with the patient effectively by providing an abundance of care and a diversity of care, we're going to see better outcomes, which is then going to trickle down to patients want to keep coming because they're getting successful results and getting the time they need and deserve. And so it all stems to, like, I really look at it as, in meeting chief clinical officer, I'm glad I look at it this way. If we complete plan of cares, if we get people to complete them and coach them to complete them, our business is good. Every patient is getting the outcomes they want and need and deserve, and our clinicians are seeing it to the end. They're going to be more satisfied too.
Yeah. And you've built appropriately along the way.
Right, exactly. So that's good for business.
You're not giving away free services, right?
No.
That's always good.
No.
That
Yeah,
keeps it alive.
great for
But,
business.
yeah, that's cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, hey, anything else you want to share about some of the leading, lagging indicators, KPIs, you name it, that maybe we didn't touch on?
Our journey has been like a constant evolution, really, and it continues to be. So, I would say keep learning and don't get stuck on one, and so keep asking the question why. I think, what we used to look at not too long ago is a 3-week retention rate, 6-week retention rate, 9-week retention rate. What's the percentage of patients dropping off in each of those kind of timelines? Nice. And so, that was cool to look at, and it was great to look at. And then we found out that if, we should see that 80% of our patients are still engaged at 3 weeks, and then 60% of our patients are still engaged at 6 weeks. And we should see that 40% of our patients are still engaged at 9 weeks. Mm-hmm. And when we kind of take people through their journey, we were seeing that. So that was a really neat KPI to look at. And so you get a chance of which providers are maybe seeing their drop off happen at that 4 to 6 week bucket.
Yeah.
And then you get a chance to educate the patient on how the programming needed to change in that. We needed to advance our care a little bit quicker. The patient got bored of the care because you weren't challenging them at a high enough level. Yeah. So we found that's that 4 to 6 week if someone's fallen off in that range. But we would know that if we didn't measure it, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, if we talk about too many KPIs, then those who are listening and are newer or maybe not tracking KPIs could get seemingly overwhelmed.
For sure. That's where we kind of got to the one, right? The one is
just bring it back to one main one.
And that was, for us, it was, for our team, we found days scheduled at evaluation was the driver of everything else.
Because
as it relates to
look backwards and forwards at the same time.
Correct. I love that. And that's something you can look at a weekly basis. So,
right.
If you have 6 evaluations of the week, what's your average for those 6 patients that you scheduled out? It's not too cumbersome to see that. Your EMRs can easily find that information.
Right. Cool. Well, if people wanted to reach out to you or learn more about Buffalo Rehab Group, how would they do that?
Through my email is the best way. So it's Eric, ERIC, @buffalorehab.com.
All right. Great.
Yeah.
Cool. Are you on the social media platforms at all?
I am right now. I'm more of I'm new to it, so I'm more of a watcher, and I do want to get involved, but I always find that there's so much great stuff out there. I get entrenched in a lot of different things.
You haven't developed your TikTok channel yet, sounds like.
I haven't. Right. My kids are into that stuff. They usually send me some cool animal so my daughter sent me one where I'm a huge hockey fan, and the MVP of the team, that she was the golden retriever that gave high paws to the players that they went on and on off the ice. So that she figured that would be a good one for me to look at. So that was the TikTok I got today.
You are, that's funny. All right. Well, thanks for joining me today, man. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll come and get in touch with you some other time.
Sounds great, Nathan. Thanks for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.